Spell points. Ever heard of them? Probably not. It's in one small section in the back of the DMG that you may not have ever read because it's kind of around things that people don't really pay any attention to. But if you want to know what they are and potentially why people are interested in them, stay tuned. Hi friends, my name is Ted and this is Nerd Immersion. This is kind of a new series that I'm undertaking. I'm thinking of calling it Nerd Immersion's Guide to Everything as a pun off of the Xanathar's Guide to Everything kind of a thing. But where I basically am going through and looking at stuff you may have forgotten about or just general things involving Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition that I find cool. I've done some stuff like this in the past under other names, but let's take a look. What we're going to be talking about now is the variant spell points, and there's an entire chapter in the Dungeon Master's Guide that I feel like didn't get as much love, or doesn't even need really love. It just has a lot of interesting things that just kind of get overlooked because I feel like the main reason people went there was explained away. And let me just go ahead and show you what I'm talking about here. So we're in Chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide called the Dungeon Master's Workshop. And what here is a whole bunch of different, this is actually probably going to be the majority of this series, is going to be going through a lot of the cool stuff here. One of the things that I say kind of doesn't get looked at as much anymore was there was a section here called Creating New Character Options, and that had a version of Eladrin and a version of Aasimar, which were what we kind of got as the first go-around of those. And if you've probably seen them, Eladrin was just basically a high elf with a free Misty Step, and Aasimar was essentially just a flip of Tiefling rather than like the new version of Aasimar we have in Volo's Guide to Everything. But this is something a lot of people have mentioned. I've seen people talk about this as a way to fix Sorcerer, which has a potential, but if you use it for Sorcerer, then you kind of have to use it for everybody. But it's this idea of spell points. So what the concept is, and I'm going to paraphrase this whole paragraph here for you, is essentially instead of getting a set number of spell slots, which if you look at any character breakdown, you see there's that table that tells you have 4 first level slots and 3 second level slots and so on, up to 9th level with only 1 spell slot of each. Instead of that, you get a number of points. And what you basically do is use those points to create a spell slot, which is kind of a funky way to describe it, but that's what makes the most sense the way things are written. So if you look at this table here, to create a first level spell slot, it uses 2 spell points. Cantrips don't require any spell points. They're free to cast, so no need to worry about that. And there's a table down here that shows you how many spell points you get for each level. So if you look at this, right, at first level you get 4 spell points, and there's also a maximum spell level you can cast. So right, you could have a ton of spell points, but that doesn't mean that you could cast a 5th level spell at level 5. You can't cast a 5th level spell until level 9, similar to the way you get spell slots as things are written in the game as it stands. Maximum at level 20 is 133 spell points, and the maximum spell level you can cast is 9th level. So here you can see the breakdown of how much it is to cast each spell, 2 for first level spell, 7 for a 5th level spell, up to 13 for a 9th level spell. However, there is a catch. You cannot cast, you can only cast spells of 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th level once per long rest using spell points. The thought process being, if you could, with 133 spell points, you could just cast a ton of 9th level spells. In the book, you're only ever allowed to cast 1 per the way most classes work as written. So that's how they kind of balance that at 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells once per long rest, utilizing all of your spell points. But under that 5th level and below, if you have whatever level of spell points you have left, you can just go to town and cast as many spells as you want. Which means you could potentially cast 5 times as many first level spells. Like, that's obviously not going to be the case, but let's do a quick calculation here, right? So if you take, at 20th level, you get 133 spell points. If you cast a 9th, 8th, 7th, and 6th level spell, that's going to leave you 90 spell points left. So that is 90 points to cast any spells between 1st and 5th level. I haven't done the exact math, but my guess is it's probably going to come out relatively close to however many spell slots you'd actually have for a character. But if we were to take that, you could, in theory, cast 45 first level spells with that, or however you want to break it up between there. I don't know what spells or what class you have, but this table, just to point this out, is for bards, clerics, druids, sorcerers, and wizards only. Sorry, warlocks, you don't get spell points. You still have to deal with your spell slot shenanigans that you have. It says if you're a paladin or ranger, take this level and cut it in half, as they're a half caster. And for eldritch knight and arcane trickster, they're third caster, so take this and divide it by 3. That's how many spell points you can get, and then associated with that. So I have heard people talk about using this as a way to fix the issues that sorcerers have. The limited numbers of spell known is my biggest problem with sorcerers, so I don't know why this would fix it. But this would, in theory, like I said, let you cast more lower level spells than you frequently could. Obviously, there is no scenario where in a long rest you could cast 45 first level spells after casting a 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spell. That's just impossible. Obviously, if you're doing that, you're foregoing 2nd through 5th level spells. But again, you get my point. So this is a concept, so it doesn't actually change too much. The process of converting spell points into spell slots is free. They don't actually give you any way to understand how you could do things like if you were a sorcerer and how you can convert sorcery points into spell slots. I guess in theory, you would convert that sorcery point into a spell slot on this table here, and in turn it would be that many spell points that you could then use to cast something else, right? So in theory, right, with that, you could take, if you were a sorcerer and you converted sorcery points into a 4th level spell slot, that would be 6 spell points, which you could then use to fuel 3 first level spells. I'm only using first level spells because it's a good example of how many more you could cast than you normally could. I've never really had any desire to use this system myself, but enough of you have actually requested the idea for me to go over this and talk about it, so I thought I would. It says right here at the top here, with this variant system, a character who has a spellcasting feature can use spell points. It gives a caster more flexibility at the cost of greater complexity. And that is absolutely the case, right? You are now potentially tracking a number into the hundreds that you need to keep track of rather than just checking off a little box. I've used a first level spell slot. Check. You're now like, well, I've used 15 or 50 spell points, whatever it is, to figure out that amount. It also, for something like D&D Beyond and most online character creators, are not equipped to use spell points as an option. Most things, including character sheets that are printable from the player's handbook, are designed for you to use spell slots. So you'd have to create your own custom character sheet or just have a separate scrap paper where you track the points. It also doesn't, again, another weird scenario, right? Let's say you're a wizard or a land druid and you have the arcane recovery type thing where you get spell slots back on a short rest. Is that then again spell slots that you're converting into spell points, which just adds a whole nother level of complexity to things? I don't know. Again, I haven't thought about it, right? So if you're a paladin at 10th level, you're going to have 64 spell slot or spell points, and the highest spell you could cast is 5th level, but you could cast, I think as a paladin or a ranger, you can only ever cast 1 5th level spell, maybe 2. Obviously, this would allow you to cast significantly more, but again, there's that greater deal of complexity, and I feel like 5th edition's kind of general motto is keep it simple, stupid, so that everybody can easily jump into a game and understand it. And I do think this actually reminds me a lot of psionics and psi points, which I never really liked in older editions. Like, psionics just drove me up a wall to the point with the amount of numbers that I had to keep track of that I just was just like, I'm not ever going to play a psionic character. Obviously, your mileage may vary. If that's something you like, keeping track of a lot of things, it's really only 2 numbers, right? How much each spell slot costs and the total number of spell points you have. So it's an option. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it myself. But, it's an option you can choose to do if you really want to switch things up. And, what I think could be a fun thing might be to use this as some sort of like, one shot maybe to just test it out, where you not have high stakes of an ongoing campaign. Or what could be really fun would be some sort of real funky magic thing happens in your world, and for like a session, the goddess of magic, the god of magic, something happens and everything's twisted and warped. And for this session, we're using spell points instead of spell slots, just to make it like a fun alteration to the norm. And then things get resolved over the course of the session. The players fix everything, and then it goes back to normal. But that's a fun way to try out this concept, see what your players think, see what you think as a dungeon master. And if you love it, then maybe you'll go with it going forward. Or if you hate it, well, you can just leave it buried in the back of the DMG where everybody else did. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this new series where I'm going to just be touching on some interesting things that people haven't really thought of, or I'm going to do a whole one, I think, just on optional rules. There are a lot of interesting things that are flagged as optional in 5th edition that some I think are super useful, others maybe not. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Have you used spell points in your games? Have you even ever heard of this in the first place? Are you at all interested in it going forward? I really don't know. I mean, it sounds like from what I've heard, people telling me they use that to fix the sorcerer. Maybe people are using spell points, and I'm just the ignorant one. I don't know. If you like this video, guys, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. That's why the rating system is there. And then again, leave me your thoughts on spell points in the comments below. And I will see you guys at whatever the next one of these videos is.